Alright, welcome back, and what's going on, guys? I thought today we would try something a little different. As some of you have seen, I have quite the CD collection. There's roughly around 3,000 CDs in there. But I thought today we would go over 10 of my most wanted CDs that I have not been able to add to the collection, and I thought we would talk about that for a little bit. So let's get into it. So when I put this list together, I didn't necessarily do it to be the most expensive CDs out there. I didn't even necessarily do it for it to be the most rare CDs. These are just 10 albums that I have always been on the lookout for. And starting with number 10, we have Asop Rock, Music for Earthworms, released in 1998. Music for Earthworms was the debut compilation from Asop, which cobbled together a hodgepodge of random tracks he had worked on up until that point. The album itself was never professionally pressed. Instead, it's a burned CDR, which Asop made himself, printed off everything, put together, and distributed through his website. I'm not sure of the exact numbers that Ace printed up, but I can only guess only a handful of these have ever existed. And with them being CDR, you could imagine that most of these are probably damaged beyond repair or just decaying with time. This is the one CD on my wish list that I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I'll never track it down. But I still think it's an incredible piece of history for an MC that would go on to cement himself as one of the greatest to ever do it. So that's number 10. Coming in at number 9 is the Madvillain, Fortet, and Koshik remixes. This was released as a tour exclusive back in 2005, and I wasn't even aware of an official pressing of this that existed until just a few years ago when I randomly stumbled across a copy on Discogs. I like the simplicity of the clear case and the cardboard obi that wraps around it, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not in love with the remixes themselves, but I'm such a huge MF Doom fan, I'm such a fan of the Madvillain album in general, that I would still love to add this one to the collection, so that's why it's coming in at number 9. So next up on the list we have BGs True Story. Originally created in 1995 and later widely released in 1999, I think the majority of people assumed that this is BG's solo debut album, which is fair with a name like the BGs, but in truth it's actually a collaborative album between BG and Lil Wayne, though the majority of the record does find BG as the focal point, with Wayne only popping up on like 3 or so tracks. Both BG and Wayne were very young here. I think BG was 13, Lil Wayne was around 11 when they were grouped together, but nothing about the record feels forced or inauthentic. I'm actually a huge BG and Wayne fan, but BG specifically was the artist that got me into the whole Cash Money movement. The price on this one actually fluctuates quite a bit. Truthfully, you can find it fairly cheap sometimes. It goes as low as $20, $30, but then it'll shoot back up to $80. This one's just a matter of time though. At some point I will be pulling the trigger and adding this one to the collection. Next up we have LP, We Are All Going to Burn in Hell Megamix Volume 2, a 2008 tour release and the second installment of the Megamix trilogy. Volume 2 has always been absurdly difficult to track down. The first disc of this double CD set is the Megamix itself, which is unreleased instrumentals, unreleased vocal tracks, B-sides, just a bunch of random bullshit. The second disc is the acapellas for his sophomore album, I'll Sleep When You're Dead. I copped the first volume years ago for a really good price. The first one's actually not as hard to find as you would think, and then the third one obviously was widely distributed. Normal stores you could cop that one at. It's just an instrumental album, but volume 2 has always been impossible, and that has always been one of the LP grails I have been trying to add to the collection. Lakim Shabazz, The Lost Tribe of Shabazz. In truth, I don't own either of Lakim Shabazz's albums. Even when they came out, they were hard to track down, and by the time I started actively collecting in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were absolutely impossible to find. I think Lakim is one of the great forgotten artists from the golden era of hip-hop, and both of his albums are really dope, but they're both just insanely hard to find, insanely out of print. I would love to own both of them, but The Lost Tribe of Shabazz has always been the one that's been on my bucket list, so I'm always on the lookout for Lakim Shabazz albums. And next we have UTD Manifest Destiny, debut album from Mos Def alongside his younger brother and sister. UTD is one of those legendary lost albums that's more notorious for being shelved than it is celebrated for having good music. Still, as a Mos Def fan and as a fan of obscure hip-hop history in general, this is one of those incredibly intriguing, lesser-known projects that stands alongside albums like Naughty by Nature's 1989 debut album, Independent Leaders, when they were still going by the name The New Jacks, which is another album for another list, but I would still love to add that one as well. This is an interesting bullet point in the career of the legendary Mos Def, and it's an interesting piece of history to have to the collection, and that's how it found its inclusion on this list. The Cenobites, self-titled. This often forgotten about Kool Keith classic sees him teaming up with fellow underground legend Godfather Don for a collection of some of the best material that Keith has ever turned in. Not unlike the album Keith did with Tim Dog as Ultra in 1996, this album finds Keith tapping into a like-minded, if not unexpected, collaborator with Godfather Don after the impressive work the two did together alongside the rest of the Ultramagnetic MCs on the 1993 album, The Four Horsemen. Some of these tracks do date back to a little bit earlier, like 1992. Godfather Don was actually producing Kool Keith's debut album at that time. And sadly, like most CDs that Godfather Don is attached to, this one is wildly out of print, wildly expensive. Trying to find it for a good price anymore is impossible, but if you see this one, definitely scoop it up because it is a forgotten about classic. 8Ball and MJG coming out hard. Probably one of my biggest fumbles. If you had told me 15 years ago when I started to take my hip-hop collecting seriously that 8Ball and MJG's major label debut would skyrocket in price the way it did, I would have laughed at you. You could find this CD at any CD warehouse, any secondhand store you went to, and as such I never made it a priority to actually purchase it for myself. It wasn't until a few years ago when I was going back to fill in some of the holes in my 8Ball and MJG collection that I was shocked just to see how fucking expensive this CD got. It can regularly be seen going for upwards to $100, which is crazy, and I would love to see this one get some kind of special edition reissue because this is a milestone album in hip-hop history, especially for Southern hip-hop, and it deserves to be out there for everybody to enjoy. Del the Funky Homo Sapien, Future Development, is in fairness one of the easier albums on this list to track down. According to Wikipedia, it sold 400,000 copies, but again, this is Wikipedia, so take those numbers with a grain of salt. And Future Development isn't like some notoriously lost album. It was just released so under the radar that a lot of people didn't even realize that it came out when it was released in 1997. I think it was available exclusively through the Hyro website, and I know it got released over in Japan, but I was 9 years old when this album came out, and I did not have the internet, and I was not importing CDs. The price on this one fluctuates quite a bit, so I'm optimistic about getting it for a good price, but you can find it as low as $20, $30. Sometimes it'll go up to $70 or $80, but if you keep your eyes open for this one, you can definitely snatch it up for a decent price, and that is what I'm hoping to do. And last, but certainly not least, we have MF Doom, Leftovers. By far, this Food companion piece has been at the top of my want list since it was released. It was given away as a bonus through hiphopsite.com with pre-orders of the album, and this is an absolute grail for Doom collectors, not only because of its rarity, but because the music included on here is so damn good. There's some amazing remixes, plus one of my favorite Doom collaborations with fellow oddball MC Paul Barman on Hot Guacamole. Everything about this EP serves as the perfect companion to that album. The CD has always been crazy expensive though, starting at around $50 when it first came out, and it's only been going up since there. I'm sure you can imagine with MF Doom's passing, things have gone even crazier, but this is by far my most wanted hip-hop CD of all time, and this is one I will actively be looking for until the day that I finally find it. And there we go. That's 10 of my most wanted hip-hop albums, 10 of my absolute grails I would love to track down someday. This is not my end-all be-all list. This is not every rare album I'm hoping to find. This is just like 10 of the most important ones that I've actively been searching for. I'd be very interested to hear what my fellow collectors out there, what are your grail items? What are you trying to track down? And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, because I would love to make some more written content, I guess. Something I can sit down and write a script for, maybe touch on some more topics, make some more lists. But thank you guys for checking it out, and I hope everybody is having a safe winter.